this was probably the litmus test, wasn't it? For this Irish side. Everybody always said, "Oh, Ireland's play a lovely brand of rugby. You know, they've some really good players, cornerstone of the team that likes to tag Furlong, Johnny Sexton." However, when they come up against a pack like France, and when they come up against a pack like South Africa, you know, they always seem to come out second best. And I think they answered a lot of critics. And it was brilliant to see. I said last week, Donny, about, you know, meeting fire with fire. I thought that's exactly what they did. They didn't have the ball for large parts of the match. They had to defend. Even though it was stop and start a good bit during the game, they still didn't have the ball as much as they're used to. You know, look at the New Zealand tests in the summer. That the majority of the possession, majority of the territory, they had, you know, all their key players getting ball in hand, making the right decisions, where they were restricted to a limited attack. And that's because of the line speed and defence from South Africa, the physicality that they brought, and they made Ireland make a few mistakes, which we probably haven't seen in the past. And I went away from the game. I watched the game live, and then I went back and watched the game again. And I don't know if the best team ever loses, because obviously South Africa didn't win, but it felt like the better team on the day probably just lost out, which is brilliant. Which, from an Irish perspective, is brilliant, that when they aren't playing at their full potential, when they do get a couple of key injuries, Tadhg Furlong and off, Johnny not 100%, big Stuart McCloskey, look at Henshaw having to drop out during the week. You know, challenges that faced the Irish team, and they answered them all. And yes, they're probably sitting in a review on Monday morning, Tuesday morning, going through everything, and everything wasn't perfect, but they come out the right side of the result. And that's all that matters in international rugby. That's all that matters when it comes to Rugby World Cups. So, yes, South Africa were pretty good on the day. It could have went the other way. They maybe, in some people's eyes, deserved the win, but Ireland got the job done. Yeah, well, there's plenty of rugby, Donny, to be played before the Rugby World Cup. And I know all anybody wants to talk about and wants to see come around is the Rugby World Cup. But there's another two games. Fiji, I just looked at the handicap. They're 28 points handicap this weekend. Fiji, that's a lot of points. And especially if Ireland make a number of changes, which, you know, they're probably going to go back to more of a full-strength team next week against Australia. And if there are a number of changes, like, this isn't going to be easy. Fiji showed that they can play ball against Scotland last week. And it's just about keeping the momentum going. And I think in previous years, Ireland have went pretty well, and then the closer it gets to the Rugby World Cup, they sort of put the handbrake on, and then when it gets into a World Cup, you know, a couple of mediocre performances, maybe not so much in 2011, but definitely 2015 and 2019, especially 2019, you know, when the team didn't play well in the group stages. And you know, you got to be playing well. You got to have your team full of confidence and not asking yourself if, but, and why all the time, leading into a quarterfinal. So, yeah, look, it's hugely positive. You beat one of the most powerful teams in the world. They have more or less fully loaded. Their pack is fully loaded, and Ireland stuck it up to them. Again, refereeing decisions might have went against Ireland on another day, but they didn't, and they worked hard. And, you know, all the coaching and staff can take a lot of positive from the performance. And what we need to keep now is a consistency and being able to, win games in different ways. And I think Ireland certainly showed that against South Africa, that they don't have to play this wide out the back, you know, line breaks time and time again. I think Ireland only made 2 line breaks in the whole match, and they were still able to get the win. Like, Porter could probably play again then. Shane could probably start again. Second rows, they might give one of them a break, you know, give Treadwell a run. I see Ian Henderson was training with them as well. He obviously hasn't played a minute, I don't think, this season for Ulster. He could maybe be in with a shot. They probably will start Jack Conan at number 8. They might give Joyce van der Fleer a rest as well, because he's been just unbelievable. I think he deserves a bloody rest. Bring in somebody like Scott Penny, or, you know, play Pete at 7 and bring in Max Deegan, or, you know, there's plenty of options there. Gibson Park will probably start the match. I'd be surprised if he doesn't. And then obviously Carberry and the centre partnership, if Henshaw's fit, it looks like McCloskey's going to be out. So maybe 4 or 5 changes, maybe not as many changes as we're all maybe expecting, because is this the last opportunity for Ireland to maybe blood another 2 or 3 lads to see what they're made of against a big, very skillful, Fijian side? Maybe, but as I've said so many times in the past, I certainly feel that there's 25, 26 players that are set in stone for Ireland, and they'll be the main guys that are going to lead Ireland to any Rugby World Cup success. But this game, 28 points against Fiji, it's still a lot of points. And you looked at the England game as well, like 20 points in the handicap, England versus Japan. Like, Japan nearly beat New Zealand only a number of weeks ago. New Zealand, making that points difference 8 points in the end, and they scored in the last minute of the match. So, like, I think it's going to be tight, a lot tighter, that one, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Japanese side really put it up to this English team. So yeah, a couple of margins in the handicap for this weekend to look out for, but obviously it all comes down to team selection, and if Ireland go really, really strong, I think obviously they'll beat Fiji well, but 28 points is still a large amount to climb in an international fixture. Yeah, he was class. He tidied up a few things for Ireland. A couple of loose balls went in behind. I think there was a kick chase which fell into his hands, and he broke off a couple of tackles, made a bit of ground, a couple of key defensive plays as well. He showed a bit more physicality for me, especially in defence. Knocked a couple of guys back. I think it was Peter Steph Toy, who's a big unit, 6'5", 115 kgs, knocked him on his backside. And it was really disappointing to see him go off, because he was playing well, and I'm sure he was devastated of the magnitude of the game and having to leave the field. But he could get another shot at the title over the next couple of weeks if the injury sort of sorts itself out. As my old doctor would say, he probably needs a few harden up pills to get himself fit and ready to go for Fiji and Australia in a couple of weeks' time. But fair play to Stuart McCloskey. Lots of critics, lots of people analysing his performances over the last, which feels like decades. And I think he justified his start against South Africa.